No big improvement there.
Call the August 8th Policy Committee meeting to order. First on the agenda, please pledge. I pledge allegiance Before we get started tonight, we do have a new member, Mr. Mike Law, who is replacing Mr. Curley, not only on this panel, but also in maintenance. So, glad to have you. Would you like to make a speech? Okay.
So move, Jim.
Thank you. Ms. Young, have a second?
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mm-hmm.
This time, we're gonna turn it over to Ms. Page. She's gonna zip right through this.
Absolutely, Chair. Committee, we have a number of policies tonight, but hopefully you will see that many of them are really reflections of changes in law, so hopefully we can move fairly quickly on most of them. First policy, policy 1.101, role of the Board of Education. Policy 1.101 is amended with a full rewrite to reflect the TSBA's suggested language. The TSBA noted frequent questioning from boards in the community regarding the board's legal authority on certain actions. This rewrite specifically clarifies the legal authority the board possesses rather than listing the generalized powers. So if you see the old policy has kind of larger overbranching powers, the new one takes those same sections but breaks it down in more specific, more clear powers.
Any questions? We're gonna approve them one at a time, I guess.
Yes, Chairman.
Okay. Have a motion to approve.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Policy 1.406 minutes. This policy has been updated to add a reference to Public Acts of 2019, chapter number 248. And all this did was clarify that minutes can be posted online rather than distributed physically or mailed.
Any questions?
Let's just say a little bit of money.
Hopefully. Okay, we have a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. See?
The next policy, 1.803, tobacco and vape-free schools. This is amended to clarify that school employees and members of the public cannot smoke or vape on school grounds under Tennessee law. It was recently amended to say that you can't smoke within 100 feet of the school door, but it also went on to say school grounds. So we've had a lot of questions from employees on whether they can smoke in docks or in their car, and under the new change in law, they have to remove themselves from any school property to smoke. So this clarifies that for them.
Can I ask a question, please? I know, Ms. Page, I had spoken to you before about possessing CBD oil, because you can also vape that, or you could take it orally or topically. I don't know what our members feel like, but I personally feel like we need to dive a little bit deeper into that subject, because it's not prescribed, so we're not going to give it to the school nurse, and it's not illegal. So what happens when one of our students, if they do a search of a locker or a search of a person and they find CBD on the
Yes.
person?
We recently amended our medical procedures to include that. So CBD oil and CBD edibles are now listed as alternative medicine in our procedures. So it would be treated like a student brought Tylenol or anything
Okay.
else they shouldn't have.
Okay.
If they were vaping it, it would be considered still utilizing a vape. So they would be disciplined as if they were smoking a tobacco product for having a device in a way they weren't supposed to. But the substance itself will be treated similar to any other herbal remedies and medicine.
Great, and that's what I wanted clarification. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Any other questions? Have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, D.
Policy 1.804, alcohol and drugs in the workplace. 1.804 is updated to reflect the TSBA's proposed policy. This adds definitions of workplace, illegal drugs, unauthorized drugs, and alcohol. It also clarifies the authority of the director of schools in their determination of discipline for employees in violation of this policy.
Questions? Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. D.
Policy 2.403 on surplus property sales. This is updated to reflect the law change that raised the threshold for items that may be declared surplus property from $250 to $500, and it removed the requirement that the property must be sold in 90 days.
Okay. Any questions? Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Deb.
Policy 2.805 for purchasing. This is updated to reflect the use of the designee for purchasing and adds guidance on online purchasing and updated certain terminology that has changed with time.
Okay. Any questions on that? Give a motion? So moved. Dodge, second. Second. Okay, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
On the next one, you'll have to swap them in your packet. I think one got in front of the other, that's my fault. So you're want to be looking at the one credit cards and credit lines. It should be right behind emergency preparedness. Apologies for that. Policy 2.8051, credit cards, credit lines. This policy has been proposed as a full replacement for the previously existing policy. The previous edition has not been updated since 2012. The new proposed language is the TSBA model language. The previous guidance has been moved to a proposed procedure where details about internal operation are more appropriate. The old policy, as you can see, is quite detailed about how we internally operate. It's not necessarily most apt for forward public-facing policy. So we moved that to a procedure. So our team will still have that guidance, but the language of the actual policy is updated to reflect more modern electronic practices.
Any questions? Have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. H.
3.202, Emergency Preparedness Plan. This is updated to reflect a law change that clarified that all schools must have an AED. The requirement to produce written copies of emergency procedures to all staff, students, and parents is removed because it is not required. And the procedures can be made available online, so you don't have to give a physical copy anymore. Language requiring principals regularly check fire extinguishers has been relocated under the correct section header. And language directing procedures be created related to AED and CPR training have been added to mirror the TSBA policy suggestions.
Okay. Any questions? Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item I, policy 3.206, community use of facilities. What you have in front of you is two possible amendments to expand the category of groups that may be considered for a fee waiver. You'll see in your packet on the top, it'll say option A and option B. The difference is option A expressly requires that if a group that is considered a patriotic and national group, which are listed in Title 36, Part B of the U.S. Federal Code, that those organizations can, in certain circumstances, with approval of the director, enter a memorandum of agreement that they can receive a waiver of fees in exchange for an in-kind service or relationship. So that's what option A lays out, and Mr. Reed, at any point, he helped draft these, at any point he may chime in too. And then option B is a little broader. It just states that the director of schools can approve and does not necessitate a memorandum of agreement in that same fashion. One thing I did want to point out to the board, that if we do desire to have written agreements for these fee waivers, that's also something we can put into procedure of how we'd like the director's approvals to look. So we have a lot of flexibility on how we actually execute those fee waivers internally, but this lays out different standards for the board to dictate. So I wanted to open that up to discussion on which you prefer, talk a little bit about what this committee thinks would be a good change to our community use facility policy.
Let me add a couple of things to what you said. What, I know we've had issues come up with when we considered use of facilities before. We've had issues with some organizations wanting to have the use of facilities that we provide to other groups. For instance, they say we may not be providing equal access to schools to their organizations if we provide them to other organizations. There has been threatened to us about lawsuits in the past. What some states have done in the last couple of years to identify kind of a core group of organizations that would have allowed use of schools without necessarily payment of fees. And this is what Tennessee has done with respect to giving certain organizations rights to come speak to the students in our schools. Every year is referred to this Part 36, Part B of Title 36 of the U.S. Code. And that is an objective list of a number of organizations that states have kind of turned to and say, we're going to refer to this list. So it's not subjective at that point with the director of schools as to whether he allows this group or that other group to use school facilities. If they're on the list that the Congress has approved, then they will have the right to have access to schools under whatever conditions will be laid out. That list was, I don't know if I see it here in front of your materials here with you today, but it was in the email that was sent out with respect to the policies earlier. And I think for the purposes of the school system, the groups that are listed in that Title 36 are the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. A couple other groups that could be impacted here locally that are listed would be the Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Boys and Girls Clubs are listed. Civil Air Patrol are listed. And Little League Baseball is also listed as organizations under Title 36. The balance of the groups listed under 36 are really kind of military type organizations, veterans of foreign wars, Korean War veterans, Jewish war veterans, Legion of Valor members, and so forth. But this code provision, the purpose of it was for Congress to recognize a number of organizations within the country that were kind of national patriotic organizations across this country on a nationwide basis that have to respond to certain audit requirements, and in order to get federal funding for things, there are accounting requirements they have to meet and adhere to stay on the list for Title 36. So I turn to that list because that gives us an objective list to turn to and avoids us having to subjectively decide whether Group A or Group B has the right to use school facilities or request a fee waiver. So it's not foolproof. It doesn't mean we would never get sued by some group that may not be listed on Title 36, but that is, this group of organizations is what most states were using, and the state of Tennessee has used to identify groups that have more access to schools than other groups do. And they're kind of recognized groups that have national standing, patriotic standing, and so forth. The most relevant groups, I think, for the Board of Education would be the Boy Scouts of America and Girl Scouts So I mentioned that. The second thing I mentioned is, of course, we as a school system can, as a board, can decide how open you want to have use of facilities and how narrow you want to have it be. You know, we went from a very open policy before our most recent change to a much more narrow policy. Before we were having churches go in schools, we were having athletic groups come in schools, we had for-profit groups coming in schools, often without payment of fees. And that was an expense the school system was having to bear, and particularly with groups that were in there making money off the use of our facilities without paying us any cost for it. You can argue that was not a good value to the taxpayer because we were subsidizing these for-profit organizations, in fact, by providing the use of facilities. All that was stopped with respect to our change that we made in the use of facilities laws and policies that we had back 3 or 4 years ago. So again, we went with a much more restrictive approach, and it's been much more restrictive since then. In the two policies that you have before you here, you have one option that has a memorandum of agreement in it that says, well, if you're in one of these national organizations recognized by Title 36, you're eligible for a fee waiver, but you still have to do a memorandum of agreement and provide some sort of services to a school in order to qualify for a fee waiver. And that memorandum of agreement has to be approved by the director of schools. So that's what one version of this says. The second version of this does not have a specific memorandum of agreement requirement in it. It does have this list of the Title 36 organizations in it, so that's the basic list we're working from, but it does not require a specific memorandum of agreement. The second one says, well, if you're a Title 36 organization, you can have use of facilities with, you can have a fee waiver. You know, there's pluses and minuses to everything you do. If we require a memorandum of agreement, that's going to be a much more narrow approach. So it's going to require much more of the organization to get a free use of facilities than not having that. It will also require more paperwork review and administrative review at a system level for someone here in Sarah's office who want to look at and make sure that's in place and it's something we want to do. So it will require more time to review it. And whether we want to go that route or just say, well, if you're a Title 36 group, we're going to give you a fee waiver. Then that's another option you look at it. So it's how narrow you want it to be, and that's for this policy committee to decide and recommend upon this board. So the other thing I would say is that if the board is so inclined, or this group committee is so inclined, you don't have to limit it to the Title 36 organizations. If you want to make it broader, you could say 501c3 organizations, and that will open up the fee waivers to a lot larger group of organizations than just these Title 36 organizations. So it's how broad we want to make it. But for initial discussion anyway, I thought the Title 36 list is a good list to start with, because that's what the Tennessee legislature has used with respect to giving students the right to talk to, make presentations in schools every year. And other states have done likewise. So that's what recent states have used as an objective list of organizations with access to schools. So that having been said, we can talk about it and get people's thoughts on it. But that's the origin of where these two options came from.
Mr. Reed, some questions. So this Title 36, based on when these concerns came up last year from another organization that did challenge us on this policy, that we were granting access to Boy and Girl Scouts, but would not to their organization. My understanding was, again, that this Title 36 did not supersede those federal lawsuits that they had won in relation to the equal access claim that they made. So I guess what I'm asking is it legally your opinion and your advice to the board that we won't be putting ourselves in jeopardy changing to this policy and still denying access to that other group or ones like it?
Well, the Title 36 list is one that the state of Tennessee has used to use an objective list to go to. So if we're looking for a list of organizations, there's not a better list of organizations out there that would be an objective list that we say these are the organizations that have been recognized on a national basis, that have particular patriotic and national standing, that have access to schools. Now, that does not mean we're going to be immune from suits from other groups. And we can never protect ourselves 100% from lawsuits because people bring frivolous lawsuits all the time, so that can always happen. But if you're wanting, fees, as we've been doing it, we can do that too, and continue to have that, if we want. Of course, requiring a memorandum of agreement is another layer of protection to the school system. If you want to have it and say, well, we want to require these organizations to provide some kind of in-kind services to schools in order to use our facilities for free. And that could include cleaning the parking lot. It could be cleaning the gym. It could be providing security for parking lots or a variety of different things, whatever the services are. That provides another layer of, I guess, insulation from these other groups potentially challenging this should we want to go that route. So,
And if I can add too, I think there's an important distinction too. Those federal cases, a lot of them hinge on denying access. We strive ever since that group to make sure that we don't deny access. The question now is, do you provide the access for free? And the federal laws do not require you allow access for free. It just has to be access. So as long as we're being neutral in our viewpoint when we offer access, and we're being neutral in our policies no matter what group's asking, we can allow that access. But we are able to charge a fee to some groups and other groups as long as we're being logical, fair, and not discriminating against a particular viewpoint or type of speech even. So a lot of that federal case law has to do with completely excluding groups.
Okay, now my understanding was there were a couple of those cases, and obviously I don't have them with me, I didn't bring them, that were not just about access. They were very specifically about charging or not charging. And they were won in federal courts by this organization that specifically the examples that they used in those lawsuits were the systems were granting no charge access to Boy and Girl Scouts. And again, nothing wrong with those organizations, they're phenomenal. But they were not granting it fee-free, or they were charging fees to this organization, and that they won those lawsuits. So, and again, I don't think, and obviously the fact that they won them in federal court, I don't think would classify them as frivolous lawsuits either. So I just want to make sure we're in good legal standing with how do we handle this moving forward.
Read on these two choices that we have here. One of the things, as I look at the memorandum of agreement, that would be in line with what we currently wage for those that are government entities. So I know that it would create more work on the part, but I would like to see something like that.
it would be akin to the in-kind services that we're getting from other government.
Could we use the B option and have a paragraph that says for people that are going to use it for 12 months a year, need the MOA, you, or whatever y'all call it.
You can require that for one-time use, or we could.
The one-time use, we could let the director say, we're going to do it, but the groups that are going to be there weekly, monthly, to have an agreement with them that states that they're going to clean up the parking lot, they're going to do in-service some kind of the school.
So you can narrow it, say, groups that are asking for one-time use, do not have to do a memorandum of agreement, but groups who are going to be recurring on a monthly, weekly or monthly basis, they would have to have a memorandum of agreement.
There's a lot of these groups that are on here, they're going to be, we've had several of them that use parking lots and stuff. One day, gone.
That's right.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman?
I do agree, I think, about the memorandum only because it will allow for standardization of what the in-kind services are. If you say to me, if I have a Girl Scout group and there's an expectation of in-kind services, that can mean very different things. And giving the access to the school could be that perhaps I am recruiting for students to join the Girl Scout, for example, or asking them or telling them about cookie sales. I just think that it's too broad. And the memorandum of understanding with your approval gives you a chance to say, okay, what are we asking you to do? or the fee waiver. What groups are included, I think that's a different issue, but I do, no matter who the groups are, believe that we should have an MOU for them to agree to.
I got a question in regards to, Boy Scouts, for example, want to use it. Is each individual troop requesting usage? Like somebody wants to use?
That is how it's been currently, each
Okay.
troop asks.
So if you do the memorandum of agreement, you're gonna do it with that individual troop, not just Boy Scouts.
Yeah, well, the way this thing is written, the organizations that use the school have to involve students at that school. So the way this is written right now, it's only, if you don't have any students at that school, then you don't qualify for this exemption here. But if you're an organization that has members who are from that particular school, then in that case, then you can fall into this. So that would mean each troop would have to have their own separate memorandum of agreement with their particular school and provide some sort of services to that school.
Okay, that's gonna be my next question, just to make sure, because I'm in favor, if they're giving something back to the schools, I'm in favor of trying to help them out. But if they're just meeting there and not giving nothing back, that's a little bit different story as far as I'm concerned, so, that's my question, just to make sure, that we're getting something back from all of them.
But this would require services to the specific school of which the facilities are being used.
Would there be different levels? Because if they meet at the elementary, it'd be different for the elementary than what they would have for high school.
Well, I think with respect to the memorandum, specific terms of memorandum agreement, you would have that would vary school to school. The principal would need to probably chime in on it, approve it, the director of schools would review it, or his designee approve it as well. So you very well could have different level of services based on a high school versus an elementary school.
So I think Boy Scouts could control, do the parking lot at Oakland, but, you wouldn't want your elementary students out the parking lot.
Right.
Any other questions, comments?
You have two options before you. Of course, you have one option always, I guess three options. One is to do nothing and leave it the same as it is right now. But then you have one that says option A on here that has a memorandum in it. And you also have the other option that does not have a memorandum in it, which is option D. So if I'm hearing we want to do the one with the memorandum requirement, that would be option A.
Be my motion is to accept option A.
Second.
Got a motion for option A. And a second,
I'm sorry, who made those motions?
Mr. Hodge and Mr. Young. Motion is to adopt option A. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Say, we have two noes. Motion carries.
Policy 4.602, grade-point average and class rank. This is updated to add back the method in which students from the graduating classes of 2020 to 2022 can earn valedictorian and salutatorian designations. This is the same method previously applicable to all classes. The graduating class of 2023 will need to meet the new method adopted by the board in June 2019. This change is proposed to eliminate confusion on which standard applies. Since we removed the language that, wholesale out of the policy, we had a lot of questions from principals about what was that standard again? We wanted to add that back in for them.
Any questions? Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Mr. Young, second.
Second.
Mr. Hodge, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Policy 4.605, graduation requirements. This policy is updated to reflect a new law that requires all students to pass the U.S. Civics test prior to graduation. Additionally, the special education section has been updated to structure the requirements clearly and added information about the alternative academic diploma, a new diploma offered by the state. Specific testing benchmarks are removed from the early graduation section, and duplicative language is deleted, and small organizational changes have been made.
Any questions? Have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Policy 4.700, this is testing programs. This policy is updated to include TN Ready and EOC grade percentages for the 2019-2020 school year and beyond. So we are now officially in the statute to the place where that percentage will stick and does not have to change over time. The interest inventory and career assessment guidance is added in light of a recent law change. The small language changes and headers are added to align the policy with the TSDA model policy and to clarify certain sections.
Any questions? Comments? Have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, sir. Second? Second. Thank you, sir. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And this is policy 5.200, this is separation practices for tenured teachers. It looks a lot like the next one, so bear with me on that one. This policy is amended by adding a third ground to when it is permissible to break a contract, and that's set out by state policy, and updating the requirements to report breaches from the Commissioner of the Department of Education to now it's the State Board of Education, based on a new law.
Questions? Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Ed. You have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Ian?
This is 5.201, and this is for our non-tenured teachers, and it's the same changes. It's a additional third ground for a break in contract, and updated the requirement for reporting breaches.
Any questions? Have a motion?
Move to approve,
Thank you,
Mr.
ma'am.
Chairman.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Oh,
Policy 5.302, sick leave. This is an amendment to reflect the changes that were agreed upon in the memorandum of understanding formed by our collaborative conferencing process. Bereavement leave is increased from 2 days to 3, and the familial relationships are expanded to include stepfamily and foster children. 1 day may be taken for deaths of cousins, aunts, uncles, nieces, or nephews, and additional days may be taken as sick days with principal permission. And this was something that was in that memorandum of understanding the board approved at the end of the year last year. So this is just the policy reflecting that.
any questions? Have a motion? Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Next is policy 5.303, and this is the same circumstance. This is a policy change to reflect the memorandum of understanding from the collaborative conference. This allows a process for personal days to accrue based on certified employees' years of service.
Questions? Comments? Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Policy 6.2011, this is an update to the voluntary pre-K attendance to reflect our new voluntary pre-K contact, Ms. Jamie Hubbard.
Any questions? Motion?
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
R is policy 6.308, bus safety and conduct. This is updated to reflect a change in law requiring adoption of a policy establishing a retention period for and mechanism for parents and guardians to view bus videos.
Questions?
How long are we maintaining the video now, or is it just taped over every day?
It is taken over quite rapidly. We met with the department head, and he said 3 days was probably the most they could guarantee right now. And so I asked them to commit to that, and they agreed to do so. So 3 days is what's in the policy, and 3 days is what they're able to do right now.
Any other questions?
And this is only video footage, no audio, correct?
It also has audio, so any video portion of it, and camera pictures if there are any stills. But it will still be subject to FERPA, so honestly, the process doesn't change much for our office. It's just enshrining that into policy.
We have one question. Seems like on our bus committee, we talked about, who was allowed on buses. And I was thinking parents, no one's really allowed on buses except for students unless the bus driver allows them on the bus.
That's right.
It kind of fuzzes things up for me on number 2 right there, saying assigned to the bus or parent or guardian of students or other persons with lawful and valid business on the bus. So
Sometimes, I think in field trips, we have had approval for chaperones in certain cases. So this language is from the TSBA model policy. If we end up not assigning a parent to a bus or not allowing that, this policy wouldn't necessarily override that, but rather indicating that they still have to be lawful and validly on the bus. So the only change, parent has been in the policy, and just added guardians so that people who aren't parents are included.
I just didn't want to open the door thinking that when a bus stop, a bus stops, that a parent can just come out on the bus, because that's not the case. So just make sure we understood that.
Is the language, I mean, I think I'm agree with you, Mr. Young. I think that language probably could be tightened up a little bit. Because it says, except students assigned to the bus or a parent or guardian of students with a lawful and valid business on the bus. They may say the valid business was they're coming on there to gripe with the bus driver.
That is an argument they could make. I know we would obviously disagree with them that that was valid and lawful, but you're right. We could seek to strike it depending on what the authority of the law is. My only concern is it does cite straight to 49/6/2008, so I probably want to do a little research into whether that grants some sort of language requirement.
Would it be possible that we could say something, for instance, to the effect of unless previously granted for purpose of a field trip, something along those lines maybe? Would that help clarify it?
Yes, depending
Yeah,
on,
I'm hearing what Mr. Spurlock has said, because I know we've had a couple of instances where we've had angry parents boarding the bus and angry parents that were angry at the bus driver, and that's not acceptable, so.
absolutely, that does, you are correct, that does happen from time to time. I can pull up the statute really quickly and see if it dictates anything specific about that. Because that statute is the persons improperly on school premises, so it's probably written fairly broadly. Yes. So it is fairly broad. It's exactly what this language says, which is ultimately the school has the authority to deem who is allowed to be on property, and that includes parents, which is the same as our visitor policy. So just like our front offices, buses, and similar, any school property, we can ban or allow parents depending on their behaviors and whether they violate those policies. So this is something we could tighten up to make it more clear. We could even potentially just strike out or parents and guardians. Just have it end at assigned to that bus period.
I think it needs to have a statement about field trips.
Mhm.
Ms. Moore's right about that.
You can say parents or guardians previously
anything that indicates permission, yes. I just don't want them to think they got the right to get on the bus. Any reason?
I think it had to have prior approval of the school system.
Previously granted permission to be present on the bus. Does the committee like that language?
The bus driver's not supposed to let anybody on the bus.
Yeah.
Any other comments? You want us to vote on that, or wait till we redo it?
If the committee is comfortable in light of our requirement to adopt a policy with that retention language, I would ask this committee if they're comfortable to make a motion to adopt the policy or for recommendation with the addition of the sentence now reading, in order to maintain conditions and atmosphere suitable for learning, no person shall enter onto a school bus except students assigned to that bus, or parents/guardians of students or other persons previously granted permission to be present on that bus, or with, and then we'll just strike out that last sentence.
By the school system.
By the school system. Okay. Permission by the school system.
Does that sound good, everybody? Okay, need a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, and I'll make that amendment so when it comes before the board, you'll see that language in the proposed policy.
All right. Policies for consideration.
Thank you, Chairman. These are policies that will be new, so they're not an amendment of a previously adopted policy. Policy 3.218, service animals in district facilities. Policy 3.218 adds procedures for service animals on school properties. The policy is directly in line with the regulations of the Americans with Disabilities Act and is verbatim the model policy of the TSBA.
Do we have any service animals in our system?
We do. We're starting to have more and more as we have quite a few.
Okay.
Do we have to allow these on the buses too?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Not really a problem if they run a donkey or something.
You can hopefully be mini horses and dogs.
Those with allergies, severe allergies.
So if it helps to explain the process of what we do and with the ADA, and it's been successful so far. We actually will have our first dog on a bus this coming up school year. Anytime we find out a parent is going to have a student with, or an employee with a service animal, we ask them if they are a parent to waive FERPA protection rights to discuss that child. We then write a letter and try to make it positive as much as we can, talking about the student and the need they have, introduce them to the dog by letter, and allow the parents to let us know if they have allergies or if they have phobias. That's another thing we want to look out for. And then those individuals have just as much ADA protection as our members of the community with a service animal. And so we then put into place a reasonable accommodation for them and put them on a 504. And that can include a deep cleaning of classrooms, rearranging of schedules, things like that to make sure that everyone is comfortable. And so far, we haven't had any issues, which is good. A lot of times, the problem is getting the kids not to touch the dogs. And so we do a lot of time training the students in the classroom about when a dog's working and when a dog's not working.
May I just ask a question or make a suggestion? Is there a list that the airline deems appropriate service animals? Because I know that they've had an issue with people just bringing all kinds of different animals.
Yes.
So
there's not a specific list. A lot of times the airlines are accommodating emotional support animals. In those cases, those are different than our service animals. The service animal has to perform a work or task, and providing comfort or security by existing is not considered a work or task. In those cases, we look at it more, instead of having a protected right to have that animal, it's a request for an accommodation. And so that opens up a discussion with that person about what can we do that would be not an undue hardship on the school. And there's a lot of people to consider with our animals. So if someone does want an emotional support dog, we generally try to find another reasonable accommodation and agree on, rather than allowing that emotional support animal. And so in that case, the only animals that we would be allowed to allow in school as an absolute protected right would be animals that had some sort of training, which helps us a little bit
with what kind of breeds typically get trained, and also the temperament of those dogs. And you'll see in there, there's also provisions where if that animal acts out in a particular way or can't be handled, then we're not going to allow that student to have that animal. You might hear from some constituents or people in the community that want to bring a dog for a very small child, but the reality is that puts too much on our staff because they have to control the animal the whole day. And in those cases, we're going to try to find an alternative for that student rather than that animal.
Do they have to have these animals certified some way before we find out that they're?
There's not a formal and federally recognized certification process. There are companies that will issue certificates, you might see them, or service badges, but the reality is that those are not formally authorized under federal law to be accepted as the say-all, end-all. If the dog just has to be able to perform the task that is directly addressing the disability of the person, and then the handler has to have control of that animal during that process, or be able to very quickly get the animal back in their control.
Here we say service dogs and trained miniature horses. Should we say trained service dogs, or is that service dogs defined here?
Service dogs without the word trained is what the ADA utilizes, and because I guess the idea being that the work may not necessarily come from a formal training process, so that an individual can train their animal themselves to do a task. We could add the word trained, this is the language that the TSBA offered, but we could add the word trained service dog. I don't think it would have a legal problem.
So the service horses, I guess, I mean, I've heard of them, but it's a little bit new and a little bit different than the service dogs. Why specifically those two? And are we backing ourselves into a corner by stipulating those two particular types of animals?
Those are the only two currently recognized in federal regulation as ADA protected animal types.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
I see problems, but it won't take them long to,
I love it.
I really need my parrot.
We've run
I
into
just got to
that.
have it.
We
There's a
have,
peacock on the airplane.
yes.
There's a
And in
peacock.
those cases, that's where they don't have a federal right to have that animal. And so that's when we enter into conversation about what is the task you need accomplished and what can our district offer you that accomplishes that same task. That isn't an undue burden. Because at the end of the day, a parrot, we could make a good argument in an educational environment. That's going to be a huge distraction and an undue burden on the jurisdiction. When if that parrot offers an alert service, we could do a one-on-one aid or something like that. So it's kind of demeaning to my one-on-one aid, but what the federal law says is if you could replace a dog with a person, then you can do that in certain situations. So, obviously, we value them more than that.
If our teachers don't have enough to do.
Yeah.
Take care of the miniature horse. Give me a break.
I've been around animals all my life. I have never seen one trained for a bathroom. I don't know how you control that.
Yes, the animals have to usually alert, and we do have to accommodate bathroom breaks for the animals. And the idea would be that you would have to accommodate a child with a bathroom break. It can't be more burdensome than that. So you can be asked to help the child, let the dog outside. Things like that, supervising child while they bathroom or cleanup, because cleanup probably has to happen from time to time. But if an animal is not housebroken, that is a reason, if they can't get it under control, to exclude an animal, even if it's a service animal. I had to learn a lot about this in a very short period of time. I read a book about it because we are getting a lot of requests. We really are.
Okay, we need to vote on that one, huh? We need to vote on that.
Yes.
All right, any other comments or questions? We have a motion.
Wait, there's another question.
These animals have to have like shot records or proof of vaccinations.
The law does not anticipate that you're allowed to ask for certification of certain things. I think at a certain point, we've worked with our parents to provide that information for safety, but legally, for example, if someone walked up to a football game and they said this is a service animal, the only things you can really ask them, if it's not obvious what their disability is do you have a disability? And the second thing is this animal, what work does this animal perform? But that is the limitations on the questions you can ask.
It's really bothersome when you stop to think that we are allowed legally to require vaccination records on our children, but not these animals that are coming into our schools. I'm not shooting the messenger, it's like,
Sure.
but that's crazy.
And we've been very thankful. The parents we've worked with generally have volunteered those almost immediately. Usually we talk about, at the end of the day, we're trying to find a reasonable accommodation in a position here where we can all get along. And I've been thankful that so far parents have volunteered that information and been very cooperative. But you're right, there could be a day where that's not the case.
Now, you like to think that if they are a true service animal, trained to service that child's disability, that wouldn't be an issue, but we like to assume a lot of things that don't always happen the way we plan.
I guess they figure state law covers you have to have rabies shots, so maybe that's what who knows what they're thinking.
I also,
Do we have a motion?
I just had a quick comment because I also think that, I appreciate the third paragraph and the details that are listed about the examples of disability and what we're really talking about. So I think that very much frames the types of animals that we'll have. And, you know, I like to speak up for our disabled students. Someone facing this disability needs to have properly trained service animals. And they're more than likely service animals that they are with all the time. It's not just, I need my service animal in order to go to school. I have worked with teachers who have service animals. I teach classes, and so I have clients that have service animals. And so it's not as much because of this language. I don't think there's as much potential for some of the outlying things that we hear about in the news all the time. Yes. So hopefully that, I appreciate the detail that's in that paragraph. Very good.
A number of years ago, I went to watch my granddaughter graduate from college, and there was another young lady there who graduated with her dog. And I just couldn't stand it, so I had to know. So I asked, and you all are probably way ahead of me on this, but the dog could sense when she was about to have a epileptic episode. And it only happened 4 or 5 times in her college career, and she was good humored about it. I talked to her, she said the dog had more credits than she did, which I found that to be very humorous. But I was like, as you said, you know, we need to know just exactly what's going on there. And I think we can agree, and this may apply to somebody here, but I see people all the time. I see dogs at ball games in this county in Oakland last year. And this is not a service animal, also Cannon County. Some people, they want to go with their dog. I mean, I don't understand it, but they do. And I just see I know we're governed by federal law, I understand that, but federal laws change. And they may add something else at any time.
Anyone else?
So the motion for this one will be a move to adopt the new policy, correct?
That's
Okay. I would move then to adopt the new service animal policy as written.
And I'll second.
Yeah.
2 seconds down here, actually.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Policy 4.206, homebound instruction. This sets out the basic requirements for homebound. We already offer homebound services, but it has not formally adopted a policy. We haven't. This is the TSBA's model policy. We've had homebound instruction services set out in procedure for quite some time.
Question?
Ms. Page,
Yes.
a student had, let's say, asthma or something like that, and they wanted to try to attend school every day, but at some point they've missed a lot of days. Would they automatically maybe be placed into this program?
Homebound placement isn't automatic. We have a homebound committee that's made up of teachers as well as some of our health professionals. And they have to have a physician certify that whatever health limitation that student has prohibits them from attending school. So a lot of the times our student who has asthma and misses a lot of days, rather than doing homebound services, we do a health plan. And so they will have their absences excused, and we also try to accommodate that because it can be considered a disability. to make sure they can get credit recovery, tutoring, the things that we can do to help build up those absences when they have a legitimate reason they can't be in our
I
class.
know there's some that I've heard of that they actually want to go to school, but, you know, it just prohibits them. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Thank y'all. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Policy 5.308 is sabbatical leave. This is another one of the forms of leave that was approved through our collaborative conferencing memorandum of understanding. This policy creates an opportunity for employees to take up to 1 year of sabbatical leave for full-time educational purposes.
Any questions? Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Dr. Mal, second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, our final policy, 6.506, students from military families. This is a newly proposed policy from the TSBA. The policy creates one central location for provisions that apply to students from military families. The attendance policy is restated from 6.200 that we already have in place, and language related to a new law requiring the enrollment of students being relocated through the military to the district is added.
Any questions? Have a motion?
Move to adopt the new policy, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, everybody for being here. We appreciate it, and we'll move to adjourn.